Hey, if you're interested in cloud security, or if you're interested in protecting your data in enterprise, then I think you want to stick around for the video today. I have one of my friends, Bob Lam, here, and he's going to share some very unique methods for protecting your data, making it more resilient. So I hope you stick around. Hi, I'm Ed Amoroso from Tag Cyber, and I have my friend Bob Lam here from ShardSecure. He's going to be teaching us a little bit about how we protect our data in the cloud, make it more resilient, and even more important, establish good compliance for our cloud data. So I'm going to enjoy the discussion. I hope you stick around. Bob, how you doing? Welcome.
Doing great. Good to see you, Ed.
Always nice to see you. You and I have been working together for a few years on these
really
topics and other ones.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's been a pleasure working with you, Ed.
It's good. Now listen, give us the 101 on ShardSecure before we get into some detail.
Yeah, so ShardSecure, we founded the company a little bit less than 4 years ago. Four of us with strong security background. Interestingly, two of us in New York City, two guys in Stockholm, Sweden. So it's really a hybrid American-European company in a way. Our development team is based in Sweden. The business team, sales and marketing are mostly in the US, but we're also building a presence in Europe as well. And the problem that we are solving, we and I talked about for a few times now, many times now actually, is as customers, enterprise customers, moving and storing sensitive data in the cloud, whether it's AWS, Azure, GCP, IBM, Oracle, they need additional layer of control for make sure the data is private and resilient and available and compliant, right? And that's where we come in.
You guys break the data up, right?
Yes, absolutely. We have a pattern, Ed, you call it cloud data fragmentation.
Right,
Thank you for creating a category for the industry. But we have a technology which is in that bucket, obviously. We call it microsharding.
Yeah.
We have patents on that. With microsharding, the data is no longer sensitive because it's so small. Very, very little that is not readable.
So if someone in a cloud, a public cloud infrastructure stumbles onto a piece of the data, it's not useful, right?
It's not, absolutely. But also not just public cloud, but also hybrid cloud, right? Look at all the major banks. You know, it'll be a long, long time before they go, if ever, 100% in the public cloud. So we're looking at more like a hybrid cloud environment. So we actually work with both on-prem data center, multi-cloud, hybrid cloud environments as well.
That's fantastic. So one of the concepts here is that the data, or at least the pieces, are no longer sensitive. Do I have that right? Is that the idea?
So it's actually we call shred, mix and distribute. We shred the data into very small pieces that is no longer readable.
Right.
We mix it with other unrelated data sets. But in some cases, for the most sensitive data, we even add some poison data to make it almost impossible to put it back together. And then we would disperse it to different storage locations. Most of them will be in the cloud, but you could also keep some on premises as well. So we support the big 5 cloud providers in the US, but interestingly, we also support, non-US cloud providers in Europe. There are not that many, a lot of small ones. But we also support Ali Cloud. So when you think about it, if you are global companies like Citi, you have to be in Asia, right? And you, in some cases, you have to store the data with cloud providers that you're not sure if you can trust. Our technology make the data private and resilient. So you don't really have to worry about whether your data is safe or not in the hand of cloud providers that you cannot trust overseas.
So I have data, you break it up into pieces, add a little bit of poison, but then I have to be able to get back. So you guys have the reverse process to take that out and put, so when I query, my data's there if I'm an authorized user, but if I'm not authorized, then I only see the
That's exactly right.
How it works?
And also it's transparent. For you and I, the end users, the experience is transparent to you and I. And we have the same software merge the data back together from different locations. We call it back. Some of them could be in the AWS, Virginia, data center. Some of them can be on Azure, right, in Chicago. So you put it back together without adding latency. That's the key work here. Because with our technology, you do parallel read and write, then you gain back the performance that the latency you might get from time to first byte of the data.
Interesting. So that's sort of the privacy sensitivity part. What about resiliency? Like how does this make things more resilient to attacks?
Yeah, the second value prop of this platform, which we, by the way, consider a platform, right, for the data, is think of it as RAID 5 in the cloud. We can put the data back together if the data becomes unavailable due to a network outage on AWS or Azure or GCP, but also ransomware attack. If the data get compromised, we can put it back together from other storage locations in real time. And that's to make it more resilient.
So you guys manage that?
We manage that. Again, we are not a service. We're not a hosted service.
Right.
We are the software platform that customers will buy from us, right? And then they can manage that using our software platform. Make the data more private because we shred it into very small pieces, and make it more resilient because we have the RAID 5 in the cloud type of technology, and we construct data in real time if the data is lost or compromised.
It's a big deal for people who are putting important stuff in the cloud, right?
We believe so. It's an early market, right? I mean, it's an early market. Customers still getting to introduce into this type of technology, but we're very excited and about the future. We also believe that in the next few years, this will become one of the best practices for storing data in the cloud.
The really critical infrastructure users, I would imagine, be all over this. Like if I was operating nuclear infrastructure, I mean, not that they're necessarily whipping everything into the cloud, but they put some things there. They may not put like nuclear secrets in Amazon, but as you work your way in these concentric circles outward from the most critical things, there are data elements that get pushed out to cloud. I would imagine that this would be perfect technology.
Absolutely. I mean, initially we have been targeting regulated industries like financial services, healthcare, and also some mission critical industry like technology.
Right.
I think 2023 we'll start looking at the federal market. We just closed our Series A round of funding, so we actually will be looking at the federal market next year as well.
Let's talk compliance.
Yeah, good.
So compliance is either a pain in the neck for an ops team or a driver for architecture and everything in between. But I would think this would be important, particularly in light of maybe some EU compliance things, like there's that Schrems 2 thing. Maybe, talk to us a little bit about that, maybe about Schrems 2 and how that affects opinions in EU about cloud, because that's a big deal, I would think, for you guys.
I'm glad you bring it up, Ed, because after Schrems 2, that was, I think, July 2020. That was around 2 years ago. The European courts invalidated something called Privacy Shield.
Right.
So that Privacy Shield allowed data to be transferred from the EU to the US. And after that, Schrems 2, a lot of the European companies are reluctant to transfer data to the US, especially using US cloud providers. Interestingly, we have been working with data privacy experts in Europe. As I mentioned, we have a team in Europe, right? If you look at European Data Protection Board recommendations back in 2021, they actually mentioned this type of technology that we do, cloud data fragmentation, we call it microsharding. It's actually use case number 5 of the EDPB, European Data Protection Board recommendation is customers can transfer data cross-border using cloud services if you have technology like the microsharding, making the data no longer sensitive, and you disperse it in different jurisdictions. So we're actually getting very good interest now for some large European companies to adopt our technology such that they can actually use American cloud providers, because US cloud providers dominate the cloud computing market in the world, but because of jurisdiction concern, then they're reluctant to use US cloud providers. So I think we have a strong value add there in Europe.
Let me make sure I have this, because this is such a key point. In Europe and other countries, or the countries in Europe, other locations outside the US, they've always had this issue whether they trust US companies to protect their data. But with Schrems 2, there's more teeth to it now. Now it becomes less whether I trust you, more a compliance issue. Do I have that right? It
Yes.
seemed like when I read it, I'm no lawyer. I don't know. But it seemed like that was one of the first places where that concern had been codified. Is that the way to interpret
It's
that?
a data sovereignty issue, not just trust, right? Data sovereignty, do you really want, governments from a foreign, jurisdictions or countries that could potentially see your data, or the foreign cloud providers potentially see your data, especially if those are sensitive data that you have to be, GDPR compliant.
That's very interesting. Now, I want to turn to a different topic, quantum.
Okay.
So you're protecting data, but it's not really cryptography. So is this like a quantum safe approach? Like as we approach maybe Y2Q, whatever that is.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's kind of a cool, maybe you've got something here to help with
We
that.
don't really use encryption algorithm, right? We're not encryption, as you said, we're not. And we've been talking to some, forward-looking customers about, hey, how can I protect my data in the next 10, 15 years? I think, Ed, you've been talking about quantum computing. Quantum computers actually could be commercialized in the next 5 to 7 years, right?
Yeah.
So we could be a good transitional technology as you add quantum safe encryption to your traditional encryption mechanism. So we can actually help you in this pretty long-term transition, right? Next 5, 7 years to transition to quantum safe technology. Because yes, we are quantum safe.
I mean, our advice has been in advance of these quantum computers emerging that can go in and who knows what they'll do. I mean, the theory is you store the stuff now, tuck it away, store the ciphertext, tuck it away, and then when you have breakable encryption processes, you go back and decrypt all the stuff that you stored, that being the threat. In theory, what you guys are doing is resistant to that attack because you're breaking these things up. We've been saying this is a good time to clean up your infrastructure, get things in order. I think what you're doing is probably consistent with that. Like if somebody listening is saying, what do I do in advance of these quantum threats? Maybe sharding's a good idea.
We think
Why
so.
not?
I mean, it's one of the solutions that we believe to make your data quantum safe.
Interesting. You talking to any universities about this? Maybe?
Not yet. We would love to. I mean, we've done some research with Stephens, I think, but we want to actually expand it into other universities as well.
But I would think this would be a good research topic for companies to dig in and try and understand the nuance between how you guys are kind of manipulating the data and how that could have, I think, very positive implication on risk reduction over the next few years. We're predicting that the quantum threat's going to come sooner than later.
Interesting.
I think we're the people making the predictions. I think are mostly scientists, and you know how scientists are. I mean, I sort of live in that world. Always very, very conservative about everything, and I think business people have to be the reverse. You have to be a little bit more aggressive. Let me ask you about POCs,
Okay.
like for people who want to try this. Take me through sort of that process. Like if somebody says, hey, I'd like to kick the tires on this. Are you just going and whipping this into their production data, or what would you typically do to get someone comfortable
we
with
would typically start with non-production data.
Yeah.
We're very customer friendly. I mean, you could try our software in our environment, AWS, Azure, or GCP, or if you want, we can go into your environment and help you install our software to POC our platform.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really take long. Typically, within a week, you will see the benefits of our type of platform in a way.
And you said the latency is negligible.
Single digit, millisecond, that type of latency. So, for cloud application is very acceptable.
I'm not going to notice the millisecond, would I?
It's fast.
I'm not that fast. I don't think I can see the difference, but that's fantastic. So for people who are interested, what's the best place for them to be in touch with you? Is there a website?
Contact us at ShardSecure.com or contact me, Bob Lam, on LinkedIn, and I will pass you to my team.
Well, that's fantastic. How are you enjoying things? How's the company's growing? Things like
It's been fun. It's been a lot of work, but very exciting. right? Because we really think that we can actually help customers make the best use of the cloud to store and store the data safely. Really, data is the new oil, right? I know everybody talk about, but it's true. And when you talk about the growth of cloud computing, it's still mostly the compute power, the workloads. Everybody talk about data in the cloud, mostly SaaS. But how about actually storing the data using S3 or using Azure Blob? Right? I think we can help you make sure you do it in a very secure and resilient way, and compliant.
You think this will be a best practice across the board in the next couple of years?
We think so. I mean, the next
kind of agree.
2, 3, 4 years, absolutely. We're seeing more companies doing that, more customers talking about it.
Yeah.
So, 12 months ago, people were actually, confused when I said like microsharding. Now they actually know what we were talking about.
Well, you first showed it to me, and I always apply the question, what's the downside, right? Like, I couldn't really think of one. Like, if you had about a bunch of latency, I'd have had an issue. Or if the administration was a pain in the neck, or if there were a percentage failure we can recover, then there's a problem. I didn't see any of that. So I had a hard time thinking what the downside is. Why wouldn't you do this? And the fact that we really can't come up with one leads me to believe that this should be a best practice. There's no reason for it not to be. I mean, unless you charge $1 bazillion for this, and I think you probably have very reasonable licensing. So, so we're predicting at Tag Cyber this to be, we call it cloud data fragmentation, but it's sharding, it's some data security, cloud data security. It's a good idea. I'm glad you're doing it.
Good. I'm glad that you agree, Ed.
Keep up the good work, will you?
Thank you, sir.
And thanks for stopping by.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Always good to see you.
Good to see you.
And for everyone else watching, we'll see you next time.